definitely welcome not only Tom and Dick, but of course some of the writers and performers who helped them. They're all going to come out together. Tom Smothers, Dick Smothers, Bob Einstein, Steve Martin, and Mason Williams. Welcome them, please. Fellas. Okay. All right. A very well-deserved round of applause. Are we full here? We were worried about it. Yes. See? They still love you after all these years. Now, my first question, I'm old enough to remember your original show, the sitcom, where you were angels. And then we saw you make guest appearances in those cherubic little outfits. When you got this show, I don't think anyone thought you were political. My question is, was this a Trojan horse? Were you always planning to do this?
Well, the Angels were communists.
No, we were
because it was a big secret until you got this show that you were this political.
No, we were not political until we got the show. After we got the show, in the process of, it took 2 years for us to be politicized, and the whole world, the United States was getting politicized. We just started seeing the war as something wrong, integration, and a lot of things were happening. And Bob Einstein, of course, never was politicized. He's still trying to find a career.
Drive on the end.
So, yeah.
Don't raise your hand, Mason. This is
Tommy and I were watching Mort Saul and all these people who, we sort of felt like that there was a whole segment of society that wasn't reflected on television. And he had just done this Angel show, and he said, man, I don't ever want to do a show without an audience. And he said,
so vacuous, there's nothing of value, and that's why I asked for creative control when we got the new...
That's why there never was another Angel show.
They're starting to realize this is really about them.
There's no real need for us to be here, is there?
So far.
Go ahead.
Your value will be revealed in a minute.
So when yes, sir.
the greening
Stop
of America.
raising your hand. I'm serious. You're making me very nervous. This is not a class.
Just put my hand on it.
Actually, I thought this was a serious question you asked.
It is a serious question. I've always been curious
what
about
was
this.
it?
No, Mason
I'm curious about yes.
Mason has some good stuff.
The show was really based on two things, and that was entertainment value, and then the commentary crept into it because I thought we wanted to reflect the times, and those times were evolving while we were doing the show.
I'd like to say, on behalf of everyone here, to get this started, I'd like to thank two people. The Smothers Brothers, all seriousness, we would have no career without them. Tommy Smothers was a one-of-a-kind. He allowed us to do things no one else did, and I'll always love him for it. We all will. I know I speak for all of us. And two...
That was supposed to come at the end. But go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm leaving. Two, I would like to thank Bud Friedman because of the improv, because he's been here all weekend and no one's thanked him.
Okay.
I like to say that there wasn't just us.
Well, who else was there?
Many other writers on the show.
Yes,
Alan Bly.
Okay.
Alan Bly.
I think we all know Rob Reiner. That wasn't Rob.
But he wasn't really on the Smothers Brothers. He was on Glenn Campbell.
No, he was on the Smothers.
Mike Marmer, Stan Burns.
Who was?
No, Mike Marmon and Stan Burns weren't on
on the
Smothers
show.
Brothers.
They were on the
They were very important.
Well, who were those guys?
This answers my next question. Why are there no more variety shows? Seriously, why are there no more variety shows? I mean, at that
I can't
time...
understand. They don't want to watch people go, yo, yo.
Yeah,
Madonna needs a variety show.
Madonna.
That's right. There were a lot of acts that used variety.
You know, this is the reason why we were canceled. It had nothing to do with politics. We just made no sense. No, don't talk to me right now. We're in the middle of saluting you.
we have more clips.
Yeah, let's show.
You said one thing.
I'd like to get one question answered before we go to it.
I want to say, Bob.
This is airing
Yeah.
on HBO.
Bob, you have.
We haven't signed anything.
Bob, I want to tell you. Don't worry.
I don't even have makeup on.
Don't worry, you'll be cut out.
We have makeup on.
The point I wanted to make that Bob said
You
something.
know what I think about everything nice I take back.
Bob, you were only under control once, and the only time you ever worked for somebody was when you worked for me, and you were the same way. But when you said, that doesn't make any sense, does it? But you paid attention. That's a good thing. But you said, just in passing, you said we were canceled. Both Dickie and
You
I.
were fired, I know.
Then why'd you say canceled?
I don't know. Can I say one thing?
You said too much.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I've got a perfect $1 million question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. All right? And the final question is, Tom Smothers, brilliant half of the most brilliant, one of the most brilliant comedy teams of all time, was fired in 1968
9.
for trying to express political views that were unpopular but were right. Is he today a state senator, ambassador to Guam, head of the United Nations, or North America yo-yo champion?
You bring up a very interesting point, totally inadvertently, because you keep sliding Dick Smothers here.
No,
Yes.
I don't, not at all.
Because the straight man, as anybody in a
Smothers
comedy
is brilliant.
festival knows, is, there is no act without the straight man. That's right.
The straight man, as I mentioned to you, the straight man in any comedy team defines the comedy team. Any comedy team has been successful over any length of time, has history, had a brilliant straight man. He is the beat, the truth, the people who, the straight man audience has to believe the straight man. If they don't believe the straight man, they will not believe the comic. And that's with Dean Martin, Dan Rowan, Oliver Hardy, Bud Abbott, not you.
He also controls the rhythm of it.
Yes.
To a certain degree.
So Dick, take a bow. Dick Smothers, take it, get it gone.
And
Spot ever, because
This is not your show,
who they
Bob.
were on the show is who they were in real life.
I know.
So we're doing a piece to open a show, and Dick collected tremendous things. And he had just purchased the first Honda 350 in the United States,
A motorcycle.
a motor.
Just filling in.
They speak English.
A Honda 350 could be anything. It could be a piano.
Doesn't matter. Who cares what is a
I'm
piano?
riding in on a
How do
piano.
you know? It's very possible to ride a piano.
I'm interested. What did I do?
So do you want to show the clips? You want
No, I do, but I want to ask this question first. Do you want to finish the story about the piano?
No, finish that up.
I mean, the motorcycle?
A duck walks into a bar,
No.
gets up in the bar, and the bartender says, "What are you doing here?" And the duck says, "Do you have any grapes?" The bartender says, "Get out of here." The duck comes back in the next day, gets to the bar, and says, "Do you have any grapes?" This goes on for 5 days. Last day the duck comes in, the bartender grabs him by the neck. He said, "You come in here again and ask for grapes, I'm gonna nail your feet to the bar." He throws him out the door. Duck comes in the next day and gets in the bar. Bartender said, "What do you want?" He said, "You got any nails?" He said, "No." He said, "You got any grapes?" What does that have to do with what we're doing?
Give Bob Einstein a job, please. The Smothers Brothers was groundbreaking comedy.
I'm gonna tell you the best Tom and Dick spot of all time. Dick owned a Honda 350 motorcycle. So we decided that we would open the show with a 2-spot where Dick said, Tom said, "I want to ride that." And Dick said, "You don't know how to ride it." Tom says, "I know how to ride it." So Dick said, "Okay, ride it." Dick leaves. And we take this earlier in the day where Tom was going to back through the big drum, and then we were going to reverse the film and the tape, and the star of the show was going to break through. Well, something happened to the motorcycle, and Tom went off the stage and crashed 5 feet below into the seats. And he's laying there, the wheel is spinning, he's going, "Oh my God." Dick runs down from his office, looks at the situation and says, My bike! Tommy said, your bike? What about your brother? I won't say anything else.
Groundbreaking television. Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Now, you were always reputed to be the one who was the most political. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were just a go-along guy, or were you taken up by that too? Did you two have fights like Barbara Streisand and Robert Redford in The Way We Were? Don't be so political, you're going to lose us our
Sort of like
jobs.
the Dorsey brothers, Jimmy and Tommy, they fought constantly over tempo.
Yeah.
And so the nuance is what we fought over, not the content. I thought if we said a little less each show, we could maybe be on for 10 years
Right.
and still get the same amount of information across. You know.
How's it feel to be right?
All right, let's go to the first clip package now.
As I said, I'd rather remain as I am today, common, ordinary, simple savior of America's destiny.
I'd like to just add that it was Mason Williams, I believe, who created that campaign and the idea, really.
Actually, Tommy and I were at dinner one night, and we talked about this, and Tommy said, well, you know, most people, when they come on, they do a joke, and then they say, oh, I'm not really running for president at the end of the show. And we said, well, since we have a weekly show, that'll be a real platform for someone to be on every week and build on a campaign. And so we decided Pat would never cop out that he was just a comedian. He would always be running for president.
And of all the things that Smothers Brothers had on the 2.5 seasons was on the air, was the most defined color of any and most defined individual was Pat Paulson. And he always saved a sketch. He always saved the sketches no matter what was going to bring Pat in. But running for president was a great way to do brilliant satire. And we lost him last year to cancer. And we have with us tonight, I'd like to acknowledge her, who gave Pat Paul some wonderful, wonderful years. The last years with Mrs. Pat Paul's Miss Norma Paulson.
I'd just like to add that Pat Paulson was a hilarious comedian, just in nightclubs, and there were bits before he ran for president. He did a hilarious bit called the comedy lecture, which was just so funny. And I always remembered one thing he did in his act. Early on, he would have his guitar and he would sing, and he'd go, try to remember.
What's fascinating about Pat is I discovered him in a club. And at the time, he wasn't doing very well, so he would cop out in his act. Then when he would do our show, he was the biggest hit in the world. Audiences would scream, and he would still cop out at the end.
Well, I met him in San Francisco, and Dick and I were just starting at Purple Line in San Francisco, and we had been working about 3 weeks, and this guy came in, and it looked old to me at the time. He always looked old. And he walked in, he looked at me, and said, after the show was over, we'd done 3 of them, they were really good. And he walks up and he says, I saw your show tonight, and I may make a suggestion. If you put a little more comedy into it, I think it'll really work. He came back about 3 weeks in a row doing this, and then he realized, who's that asshole? Come back here and keep saying this. And they found out it was Pat Paulson, had to act up the street. And that's when I fell in love with him. I did it was great.
He also wrote material, and one of our most famous, I Fell in a Vat of Chocolate.
From our album.
On one of our albums was, the song was written by Pat Paulson.
Yeah. The great thing about Pat is if you wrote something for him, he made it work.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
He was
As
really
opposed
great.
to us.
Pat was just fabulous at staying with you to work it out.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned his age when you first saw him. When you were doing this show, how old were you when you started doing this show in 1967?
Well, we started, let's go back, San Francisco, I was 20 years old.
20 when you
20.
He started the business.
He's 20.
But when you had this network show,
I think I was 27, 28.
27.
Our first national television show was in 1961 on The Tonight Show's Jack Parr. That's when
Yeah, but I mean, when you were doing this Smothers Brothers show, you
We were under
still
30.
in your under 30.
And these guys, when he came on, he was 21 and then
I was 29.
21.
21.
You're all lying. All right, say this.
30 years ago.
No, I understand.
It's as low as I could go. I couldn't go 12.
Right.
It's amazing how youthful it is.
It's amazing that you people that age were taking on the CBS television network and the President of the United States and William S. Paley. And I want to get into some of this censorship stuff. Look, you have 72 episodes of this show that I think you own, but there was one that never even aired. Tell us about that episode, because that's the David Steinberg episode where what was so bad about the whole show that they couldn't air it?
Well, it was not the whole show. It was the weight. It was like a red herring. It was the David Steinberg sermonette, and it was Easter. Eisenhower died, and Dickie was away, and now was it? Nixon had been.
Yeah, before we go to that was the one show I missed. I was in Sebring, Florida, racing the 12-hour race of endurance, and Dan Rowan, who I think is just the greatest straight man. CBS said he could stand in for him on the show. And so I just leave the show 1 week and we're fired.
See how it works?
You know something? You never once blamed me.
Until now.
Tell me.
The thing about the David Steinberg show was that it had religious overtones, and a sense of humor is a sense of proportion, and they said that basically that crowd,
That was the one thing that we could never say or do without tons and tons of letter. Anything religious, relatively. It was floods of letters. And they were always written, we would get compliments and the letters would be typewritten. And we would get pans and they'd be written like this. I hate
And I don't know, do I have this correct? The sermon that David Steinberg did, was it the Moses one or the other one? And had been done on the Tonight Show and had been seen on national television.
Right.
So as Tommy said, it was a red herring. It was the straw that finally...
That was what broke
It's an excuse.
War in Vietnam.
interesting point that it was 9 o'clock was the problem. 11 later, was not the crowd that got upset over things like
Tom
that.
also went and talked to the NAB. Did you think that?
NAB.
NAB.
National Association.
Yeah, boy. They were really tough back then, now. Yeah.
Why don't you relate that story?
Well, I was going to ask, who were you fighting with exactly?
It was the National Association of Broadcasters. We were told we were threatening their license renewals. We had to put the shows. The whole last year had to be pre-screened for every single affiliate.
And that was air freighted. Some person took a tape, flew on an airplane Saturday.
To New York.
They showed it to deliver you there.
And during the editing requests for deletions, we were a little late in getting it to them. And remember, at those times we edited with a razor blade, and it would put. That's how you edited videotape, big pieces of 4-inch videotape. So they said, well, it was totally Vietnam War. That was it. Nixon was in.
Right.
Dr. Stanton, William Paley, and Walter Annenberg were both now looking for the court in St. James.
You know what?
I always
We dug in the files, every single thing we ever did. We couldn't come up with something now that they would even believe that anybody would even censor.
Yeah.
It was so inane, and I never knew, because you kept us all in the dark as to what was going on.
I shared everything.
I never knew exactly why we were canceled or fired. Why was it because you went to Washington, or was it because we were delayed? We didn't deliver the show on time.
You'll never know, Bob, because
I know you
have
won't
no
tell
heart.
me now. You stole me money. You didn't pay me for the last show, and that's 30 years ago.
I have a
Raise your
confession to
hand.
make. That's right.
Go ahead, Steve.
I always believed it was something to do with Nixon. I think it came right from the top. I just smelled it. I just sensed it.
And it was
It came
Annenberg.
from pressure from the White House, pressure for their license. And they could do that subtly.
TV Guide was Annenberg. They hated it.
But didn't someone say to you that if you don't go to Washington, when they cancel this, and if you back off, that they will, where they fired us, excuse me, if you back off, that they would put us back on? Didn't they say that?
I don't.
So that meeting you had with us,
Came
Until
to an agreement.
1974.
That's what I...
Elvis went to see Nixon in 74. The show was canceled in 69.
Which proves it.
he really was right, but he made his point.
Don't say that to Mason.
Yeah, that's quite a conspiracy.
Okay, that's one, you know that weird trip when you
You want to show the other clip? Okay. Let's go to, right, this is, we have, these two guys, two of the writers who got their start on the way on camera.
They said,
Also, Bob
aren't you the
Einstein.
youth of America's trade with all this rock and roll and swimming stuff? He says, there's only two subversives, the Beatles and the Smothers Brothers.
Bob's there, let's say.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's Judy.
Empty hallways, the pale dead moon in the sky streams with gray.
Now that I'm drenched in sweat.
Yeah. And what have you gone on to do since then, Steve?
I have to, first of all, Bob and I were writing partners on the show, and we had, fantastic times, and Bob was very generous to me. But I have to acknowledge Mason, who gave me my first job on the show, the Summer Brothers Smothers show, which was the Glenn Campbell show. And he hired me. It was a kind of a dumb premise. You wanted people under 30. It's like that.
That time you're not supposed to trust anybody over 30.
Right, exactly. So you needed people under 30 who weren't talented. So I was dating a girl, we named Nina, and we'd sort of broken up, and Mason started dating her, which is the way it worked in those days. And she gave Mason my material, and Mason, I guess, showed it to Tommy, and I was hired for the show, but I had no track record, no nothing. I wasn't in the union.
You also had no office.
No office. But I found out later I was making $300 a week, and I found out later that Mason was paying me out of his own pocket.
Remember when Nina
I think you would have put him in one of your movies.
I remember.
I'm not that generous. I'm not grateful.
I remember going to Tom, and because Steve was sitting out in the hallway without an office. I remember going to Tom and said, Steve Martin's out in the hallway, hasn't got an office, and look at those feet, nobody could get by. And I said, he's got to have an office. And he said, well, he's not Steve Martin yet.
Well, I would love to know about the process that went on there behind the scenes. How did you pitch ideas? How did you get your stuff on the air?
It's insane. The whole thing was insane. We worked, I would say we worked 18 hours a day. And
Yeah.
we were kids, so it didn't matter. And Tom, Dick always surprised me because I never saw him study anything, and he never missed a beat. I would come in to give him a note, and he would get a hot oil massage from his secretary, and he would come out, and he would nail it. Tommy was into everything but memorizing his lines. He was into directing, watching the monitor, looking at wardrobe, hearing music, but he was so brilliant that he got laughs even if he missed the mark. I mean, they were truly unbelievable, and Tom and Dick Smothers, and I want to lay this a little more on Tommy, was the most egoless performer I have ever met in this business. I've never met anyone who cared so much about seeing other people do well. And that's where the crying shame of them getting thrown off the air is. He had the Glenn Campbell show, he took Glenn from nowhere. He had the Smothers Brothers, and he had 2-hour replacements for those shows. He could have had 4 hours of television on a week. So that's the real crime because of
Thank you very much. I did for some nice things for some people, little stars, but you were the only failure.
That doesn't mean you didn't try.
I didn't try.
Still try.
What about this writers' show?
That was the worst piece of shit in the history.
No, what it did?
No,
What was
it
the
was. The
concept?
concept was that we thought we were funny enough to do a show with writers.
Excuse me.
It was the lowest rated show we ever had.
Once every season, we would bring the writers, as all the writers were performers, folk singers, pickers,
Let me just tell you
writers,
one
and
thing.
we'd always
I just have to tell you one thing. How dangerous he was. When he would go home at night and come in the morning, we knew there was going to be a total upheaval. Stuff was going to be thrown out because he would talk to his neighbor or something. And his neighbor, his gardener, would say, you know what, it'd be better if you did this. And boom, come right. All of a sudden, one day, we had this man show up. He was 78 years old, and his name was Cy Howard.
Famous
And
writer.
Famous, yeah, he wrote My Friend Irma, and, which was really conducive to our way of thinking, our show. And so the first meeting we had, he said, sit down, I want to tell you something. He said, I'm an old man. He said, I can't get a hard on. Let's do a sketch on it. I said, Cy, how exactly did you get this job? He said, Sunday I had an open house. Tommy was going to buy my house. He hired me.
This was the only show with 4 banjo players.
Yeah.
4 banjo players, and also I want to say something here of the feedback nature where I got most of my feedback, not from the gardeners and stuff, it was from Mason Williams. I bring a sketch home when, or a script home when we first started, it was just a writer, his first writer guild, being like Steve later on. And I'd take it and read the script together. He said, bullshit, bullshit. I said, bullshit. And I go in there, I say, read the first reading of the script on Monday. I go, oh, this is bullshit. Well, we'll work on that. And then I started bringing in more and more younger people, and then to the point where the 1969 was, that season was a little wired, a little out of control.
A little high.
A little high.
I was going to ask about that.
Wait, can I say something about...
Yes?
One of the great things about the Smothers Brothers show was they wanted to develop writers, not pieces. And so they would perform a piece the way you wrote it the first time so that you would see where you weren't hitting the mark.
Right.
Because if the head writer takes it away from you and changes it, then you don't see where you...
Well, they all got to work the piece through. It wasn't taken away from them and taken to a head writer. So many of the people came off the show, went into other shows. They produced a lot of people, put producers, and created their own pieces because they were allowed to do it and not isolated. And that was the most exciting part of having the show was finding these people.
Yeah, and I thought when we got fired, there was in place a production entity. And I think, Mason, you hit on that. You possibly, or Bob, we could have 4 hours on the entity. We had, Tommy took the director, Tim Kiley, from Ed Sullivan, the best live director in television. And Tom had all these writers. And when they were in place to go into new products, and when they fired us, I think most of them did go to the Sun and Cher show. Called the Sun and Cher Smothers Brothers show. I mean,
Hey, Steve, you worked on the Sunny and Cher?
I did.
And you did too?
Yeah.
Mason?
I did.
You did?
I'd like to,
Why didn't I hire you?
Mason was with Elvis.
My wife, Kate, was a dancer on the show, and she used to say that
We all knew Kate.
everyone wanted to come to the show early and stay as late as possible because it was really an exciting thing to be involved in.
The Sunny and Cher show?
No, the Smothers.
What was the chair show and ride as late as possible? Leave as early as possible.
Was that what it felt like?
That was right
No,
after
it was
the
fine.
taping.
Too bad. I remember the strangest thing is, one week, this had to do with the ratings, and one week we would have the Beatles on. We'd be so excited. The Beatles had never been on American television. And we were just like, we're the greatest thing that has ever happened because we're having the Beatles on. And the ratings come out and they'd be fine. And then next week they would have Kate Smith on and the ratings would be through the roof. Kate Smith was always one of the highest rated shows.
But that was the toughest part of the writing, is when you had a guest like Kate Smith.
Tell them that.
And he would come in and say, all right, do a Kate Smith Smothers Brothers spot. So it was one of the first things I ever wrote. It was a bumper between the shows, a 1-minute piece where Kate was dressed like Oliver Hardy and Tommy was dressed like Stan Laurel. And all she did is look at him and say, here's another nice mess you got me in. So we go to the read-through. She reads it and then stands up and says, who wrote this? So I stood up, I said, I did. She said, you're the reason I'm walking off this show.
When you look back, it was quite sensitive of you.
I didn't know. I just thought she would love it. But you're portrayed as a fat man if you're a woman. I'm gonna give you a great moment. It was very difficult sometimes to convince him to do things if he didn't want to do it. And we had run-throughs where we would run through for the writers and then all the executives and
And the
everything.
writers always laughed at their piece really loud.
I came up with an idea it was a stupid idea, but I thought it might be funny, Tommy being a rock comic. So we dressed him in tight black pants and everything, and in front of him we had gorgeous girls, the dancers, screaming at every joke he did. And he would do a joke and then strike a pose. So in the run-through, we all died laughing, and he hated it. And I was standing as Officer Judy.
But you always said, trust me, it's great, it's
It's a
going to
great
work.
bit. And I'm standing as Officer Judy next to him to protect him from the crowd during the bit. Now, while he's doing it, I can see the audience. He can't. He can just see the girls screaming. And he'd tell a joke and wiggle, and the audience is like this. The girls are screaming, so halfway through the bit, I said to him, Tommy, he looked at me, I said, you're bombing. You were right.
All right, we should probably, yes, sir.
Can I say, the philosophy of the show was that when an artist would come, we would try to present them doing what they did and then include them in something like Kate Smith would sing When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain and then be Sergeant Pepper. So it kind of revitalized their profile on TV in many ways.
One of our first influences was Nichols and May, and our first run-in with the censors was with Elaine May on the show, doing a piece on censorship, and they took the whole piece out, and I screamed bloody murder, and the press is interested in this stuff, and was the whole sketch that Elaine wrote was in a reprinted in the New York Times, ridiculing the concept of censorship. So every time that they would take something out, or there'd be something out, I'd run to the press and start screaming. I said, "Look, that poor boy, they were treating him badly." And we had mentioned Another Mother for Peace in 1968, and CBS said, "You must take it off." I think it was under pressure, 69. They said it might be a communist front organization. And we had to fight for that. So there's a lot of little things that
Do you remember that when we were nominated for an Emmy, they censored our clip for the Emmy show? They wouldn't run it. That's the truth.
They censored the Emmy
Yes,
clip?
they wouldn't run it. And we won the Emmy. And it was a show.
After we were fired, we won.
Yes, and we won a show with David Fry, who was a great impressionist. And he did an ending finale number where he played all the presidents. And it was 5 minutes before showtime. This is disgusting, but it's the funniest memory I have. We couldn't find him.
I was with you.
Yes, and Steve and I are we go into the men's room, and in a stall, taking a crap as all the presidents was David Fry. He was rehearsing all his different characters. He was like, I'm not a crook.
Thank you for sharing, Bob, as always. Let's go right on to the final. We have one more clip package because there were some other very, very talented.
Those hairdos.
A doily for your mind. How do you feel about that today?
Those hairdos, yeah.
No, I mean the doily.
Yes, it's to a certain degree.
It's an apt metaphor.
Yeah. Well, I always believed that you could take the high road and stand up for your position. You know, I used to say to them, you know, CBS is like a high school. You know, you turn in your assignments, so they're the scripts, and they get graded and whatnot. And I learned all this stuff in high school about America, freedom of speech, and all this. And I said, I'm going to hold you to that. And I think that I was on solid ground.
But, you know, earlier we were talking about... Some of us were saying before that there are things, most of the things that were cut out would be, of course, allowed today. Very few of the things that were political wouldn't be allowed on a show today. However, I think we should note that the drug jokes that we saw there today would not be allowed in some places. Those jokes that Lee French was doing.
But they weren't interested in that. We got away with that.
I know, but how did we lose that? How did we lose our freedom of speech about that issue?
People started jumping off buildings high on LSD.
What about, well, you know, by that argument, we shouldn't drive cars. I mean, 50,000 people die in them every year. We don't make them.
I think that the people in the business dying from drugs had a big effect.
Well, let me say, I want to say,
And what about the staff?
let me say, you know,
As
you're
far as
saying-
drugs were
Yeah,
concerned,
how high were you when you were... I mean, this was 1968, 69.
Wasn't part of the show.
It wasn't.
You couldn't afford to work 18 hours a day and be stoned, believe me.
I wasn't there.
What a disappointment. All right. Oh, thank God.
Those other 6 hours.
Now, one question you said, what happens, all these things you could say today? I've had people come and say, don't you wish you had the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour on today with all the freedom there is of expression? There's nothing, you could put it on. Well, if you look at television today, there's no political satire in prime time. It's all Dennis Miller, 11:30 HBO. You're not in the prime time center. Right now, you could not do it again. There's an illusion there's a freedom of speech. And we're talking sex, drugs, violence, and vulgarity, but there's no content in it.
You can make bathroom jokes and say suck and tit.
And you can kill people. And
Where?
do all that
What
stuff.
show? You've never seen that in Veronica's Closet.
Yeah. Why are you watching that? I say you can say it. Anyway.
It's still not a medium for ideas.
Right. It's not even a medium for entertainment. It's an advertising medium that inadvertently presents some entertainment once in a while. Okay. I want to ask how much these battles, now I guess you guys were not on the front lines, he was protecting you or fighting them. How much did they take a toll on you personally? I mean, they say a president ages more than his 4 years in office. Do you think you aged more than your 3 years during that show? I know you two went to couples therapy.
That was years later.
Oh, yeah.
It did work. I think...
Yeah, well, I'd like to say, and my feeling of it back there, Tommy was the bumper. Tommy was the protector. Tommy was the fighter for the writers. He stood up. Stood up. Mason was really the moral strength of the show. That's really true. And Tommy listened to you a lot, and he listened to all the young writers. And some of the writers made my brothers seem conservative. They were so radical. I think Rob
Reiner was in your
way
face.
past out there. But Tommy...
Rob Reiner was on the show.
that was the...
Summer show.
Summer shows. We were partners. Rob and I were partners on the Glenn Campbell show, which was the first summer show, and then Bob and I became.
And why isn't he here? What?
Because it wasn't really on the Smothers Brothers show.
Okay, so anyway, Tommy
Mostly
was...
couldn't get him.
I'd like to say... This is just like a lot of forums I see on television and nobody ever finishes a thought.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. I guess that's a straight man in me.
Yeah, sure.
But,
Go ahead.
Tommy would say something about the question, does it age you more than the calendar time or whatever. Tommy went to bed with the problems and the pressures. He was a part of the creative force, but he listened to them. He assembled all these young people without a lot of credits, as I've already said. But then when he stood up for them and fought for them, and so his memory of that would be as the guy who was going into the offices and talking to the guys. He took the brunt of it.
But I don't think it
I wasn't standing up for that. I was standing for the concept.
Yeah,
It was the concept that someone could go in and say, you cannot say this. I said, I have creative control, and these are the people, these are our ideas. Why are you saying we can't do this? Tell me your reason. And they said, well, because. And there's nothing, you become a poster boy for when you get hit by a drunk driver, from a mother for mad. Or I became the poster boy for censorship. And it was because they touch you, all of a sudden you find yourself speaking, and people are encouraging you. You're like, yeah, come on, stand up for that. And it was very exhilarating, and I lost my sense of humor for about 3 years after that. Everything I heard, and when I go on a talk show, I'd hear serious problems I would not see. I saw Jane Fonda on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and she had Cesar Chavez, and she was talking about some animals and talking about Vietnam, and I saw this dreadfully stern instance. I said, man, for the last 3 years or 2 years,
I found what you lost.
I saw her, and I said, I don't have any sense of humor. I turned her right around, so I owe her gratitude, because we can get caught up in a cause, and get caught up in something that means something you seem to be more than is the big picture. I lost the big picture. And,
yeah, but I don't think any of us ever dreamed you would be fired. I mean, we were so hot. The show was so hot. We had the youngest demographic in the history of television, as far as teens coming to a television on a Sunday night. We were beating Bonanza.
But did they
So
care
even-
that much then about the young demographic?
They cared about everything, but obviously the pressure was coming from Elvis. And,
Still is.
no, the pressure was coming from Nixon.
Yeah.
And the graphics was not a word that was used.
I was going to say, I don't, back then, wasn't every
No,
viewer
it
equal?
was, no, they were very,
Really?
They had breakdowns in the 13.
yeah, they were very,
And they wanted the young?
yes, absolutely. And we were beating Bonanza. That was impossible. So no one ever thought that we were going to be fired. I think if you thought that we were going to be fired, you would have backed off like the chicken shit that you are.
Well, let me say, I did understand that there was a crisis coming as I rid myself of some material things in the last final year of the show, thinking that I might make decisions that would not be fully courageous if I was having to cover some expenses I didn't. So I got rid of big houses and all that kind of stuff, and so I could go straight at him with that.
You mean you divested yourself
Yes.
of property, so
Yes.
you couldn't be sued or something?
No, so I wouldn't
Couldn't have
be
the payments.
So I wouldn't be held like a. There's people
No,
that
no,
Oh,
leave
I
off,
see what you
you know,
mean.
I
So
didn't
you
wanna-
could afford to be fired.
I could
Right,
afford
right.
to.
And we had our stuff taken from us too. Thanks for telling us.
At that point, you didn't have.
I
any
was
stuff.
out buying houses. We were selling shit and I'm buying stuff.
I was driving to work in my Jaguar XKE when I heard we were canceled.
You went right to work, and 4 weeks later on the Sunny and Cher show.
Yeah.
We did it.
I thought the show was a platform for the counterculture. That meant the music, the styles, the art styles,
Right.
and also the thought. And there was, basically the network didn't want us to be expressing that culture, which they did not supply, because they tend to want to have people on that, that are
Support.
from their factory, let's say.
You
know, I thought
were much too intelligent for our show.
You know, I was watching those clips. That opening clip, those opening clips were wonderful. I mean, there was some essence. I look back and I said, Jesus, maybe we didn't say anything. Maybe nothing would be worthy. But 33 years later, some of those things hold the power right now that on primetime television that would.
It was nostalgic for me because a lot of those intros where you would say, and now I'd like to present, I wrote those.
How about a hand for our panel, ladies and gentlemen?